This is Mrs. Cotter. We're going to go over week 8, day 2. So let's go over this table first. So the table shows the favorite subjects of their third graders at Cayuga Elementary. So here we have a table, and at the top it shows us the favorite subjects. So math, ELA, history, and science. And for math, ELA, and history, they give us a number of student votes, but for science, they have a question mark. So for part A, it'll say how many students voted for science. So when we look at our table, on this side, we can see the number of students. This is telling us how many students there are. And at the bottom is the subject. So math, ELA, history, and science. So A, it says how many students voted for science. Well, each box, if we look, is equal to 2 student votes. So each box equals 2 all the way up. Now, there are 2 ways to figure out how many students are for science. We can count by 2s all the way to the top of the gray squares, or we can look at the table and see where it lines up to how many students. So let's do both ways. So I'm going to skip count by 2s for all the gray squares, and then we can look at it the other way. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So there are 14 students. Whoops. There are 14 students who voted for science. And we can also look at this way. So if we look at the top of that gray square and we go all the way down, we can see that it stops at 14. All right, so then B says, how many more students voted for math than for science? Write a number sentence to show your thinking. So if it's asking how many more, we should know that this is going to be a subtraction problem. So we're going to look at math. So we can look at this table over here to find how many students there were for math. So for math, there were 18 students. And for science, we just figured out that it's 14. So we're going to do 18 minus 14. And that's going to tell us how many more students voted for math than for science. So go ahead and figure that out. If it's easier for you to figure it out this way, on top of each other, you can do it like that. And then go ahead and figure that out. What is 18 minus 14? And that is 4. So 4 more students voted for math than for science. All right, let's look at part C. It says, who gets more votes, math and ELA together or history and science together? So when we see that word together, we know that's going to be an addition problem. So let's look at how many votes there were for math. We're going to look right here. There was 18. And they want to figure out how many votes there were for math and ELA together. So 18 plus, let's look at how many votes there were for ELA. That's 13. That's for math and ELA. And then they also want to find out how many votes there were for history and science. So I'm going back to my table. I see that there are 17 for history. And they want to find out how much there is for science. We figured out science. That's 14. So I want you to go ahead and add 18 plus 13 and 17 plus 14, and then we're going to find out who got more votes. So what's 18 plus 13? That's 31. And what's 17 plus 14? That is also 31. So they have an equal amount of votes together. So history and science and math and ELA both got 31 votes. So they are equal. All right, let's move on. All right, example number 1, this is new learning. It says use the fractional units on the left to count up on the number line. Label the missing fractions on the blanks. So we're going to look at this table first. So on the top, they're doing their fractions in halves, and on the bottom, they're doing in eighths. Now, the ones where you see this is the darkened lines, those were the missing ones, and they filled it in for us. But all they're doing is they're looking at 0, and they're saying 0 over half is still equal to 0. And if you look at the bottom, 0 eighths is also equal to 0. Then the next blank, they just filled in for the eighths. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. They're just filling it in, counting by eighths. Then they just did it for the halves and they did it for the eighths. So they just did it here. Same thing here. They did 0/2, 1/2, 2/2, 3/2. And I know that they have some squares and circles and triangles. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So for number 2, it says use the number line above to do the following. The first thing was they said circle the fraction equals to 1. So if you look, you see the circles right here. Well, 2/2 and 8/8 are equal to 1, and we can see that 1 right there. They're right above it and under it. So 2/2 and 8/8. And if you notice, this is same number on the top and the bottom for 2/2 and 8/8. 8 and 8 on the top and bottom, and 2 and 2 on the top and bottom. Let's look at the next bullet point. It says draw a box around the fractions equal to 1/2. So I'm going to actually look at 1/2 on my number line, which is right here. It has a box around it. And then right below it, at that same point for 1/2, it's also saying that 4/8. So 1/2 and 4/8 are equivalent. They are both equal. The next one says draw a star next to the fractions equal to 2. So if you look, there's a star at the end. We see that 2 is right here, and 4/2 is equal to 2. And 16/8 is equal to 2, and there's a star. And actually, if you do 4 divided by 2, that is also going to give us 2, and 16 divided by 8 is also 2. So that line, you can think of it as like a division sign. That fraction sign, it can also be thought of as like a division sign. And the next one says draw a triangle around fractions equal to 3/2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at 3/2 on my number line, which is right here. And right below it, I see 12/8. So they put a triangle around 3/2 and 12/8 because it's at the same point. So they are equivalent. They equal the same thing. And they said write a pair of fractions that are equivalent. So we see that 2/2 and 8/8, they are equivalent. 1/2 and 4/8 are equivalent. 4/2 and 16/8 are equivalent. 3/2 and 12/8. They are all equivalent. They are at the same point, so they equal the same thing. So at the bottom, they use the example of the ones that are in the triangle. 3/2 also equals 12/8. Remember that when they are at the same point, they are going to be equal. So don't forget about that. All right. Now it's our turn. So it says, let's try example number 1. So first of all, we're going to look at the fourths, and we're going to fill in those blanks first. So here it says for fourths, we're at the 0. So the first fraction is going to be 0. And remember, the number on the bottom does not change. So it's going to be 0/4. Then they counted. So 0/4, 1/4, 2/4. What comes after that? 3/4. Okay, then when they counted down, 3/4, 4/4, what comes after that? 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, and 8/4. So they're just counting up. Now let's fill it in for the eighths. I'm going to do that in a different color. So they started off with 0/8, and they did 1/8. What comes after 1/8? 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. They're just counting up. 5/8, 6/8. What comes after that? 7/8, 8/8, 9/8, 10/8, 11/8, 12/8, 13/8, 14/8, 15/8, and what comes after that? 16/8. So just counting up the number line. All right, so we filled in the missing blanks. Now let's see what they're asking for example number 2. It says use the number lines above to make the number sentences true. So we're using this number line to figure out what it's going to ask us to do. All right, so they're giving us some more blanks to fill in. It says 1/4 equals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at 1/4 right here. And it says 1/4 equals something eighths. So I'm going to look down. And I see that it's going to equal the same as 2/8. Whoops. Let's go back. There we go. It also equals 2/8. All right, the next one says 6/4 equals 12 something. Well, we know that we're working with only fourths and eighths, so it has to be something with the eighth. So I'm going to look for 6/4, which is right here. And I'm going to look down, and I see a 12. So 12/8. Now it says 2 equals 8/4. So I'm going to look at where my 2 is. So I see that it equals 8/4. And it equals something eighths. Well, I'm going to look right below it, and it's going to be 16/8. All right, and we filled it in. We use this number line to help us with our questions. All right, let's move on. It says use the fractional units on the left to count up on the number line. Label the missing fractions. So again, we're going to be labeling our missing fractions. So let's look at the first number line. I'm going to hide that one. Let's look at the first one. So we have halves and fourths. So let's do the halves first. So we have 0/2, 0/2, 1/2, 2/2, 3/2, and 4/2. Now I know this can get a little tricky, but remember the halves are in the solid tick marks and the fourths are in the dotted tick marks, so that should help you distinguish which ones are going to be in halves and fourths. So now let's fill in the fourths. So we have 0/4, 1/4. What comes after that? 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4, 7/4. What comes after that? 8/4. Good, we're just counting up. All right, now we can do our other one. So now this one, they're doing it at halves and sixths. So the top is going to be the same, just like in this number line. So the first one is 0/2, 1/2, 2/2, 3/2, and 4/2. Okay, so now we're going to look at the sixths. So this time, they want us to figure out not every mark, but just the six. So we have 0/6, 1/6, and here is going to be 2/6. So I'm going to write that a little bit small. Then we have 3/6, 4/6, and we don't have to put these ones at the tick mark, but I'm just going to do that just so it's easier for us to see. 4/6, 5/6, 6/6, 7/6, 8/6, 9/6, 10/6, 11/6, and the last one is 12/6. Okay. So now let's see what they want us to do with these number lines. So it says using the number lines above to color fractions equal to 1/2 blue. All right, so we're going to be using both of these number lines. So we're going to look at 1/2 and we're going to circle them, the ones that are equal or equivalent in blue. So 1/2 and 2/4 are equal. And here, 1/2 and if you look below, what's equal to it? 3/6. So we colored those in blue. So 1/2 and 3/6 are equivalent, and 1/2 and 2/4 are equivalent. All right, next it says color fractions equal to 1 in yellow. All right, so we're going to look at 1 at the first one, and we see that 2/2 is equal to 1, and 4/4 are equal to 1 because they're right above each other and right at that 1 tick mark. And we're going to look at the one for halves and 6. So here's 1. We see that 2/2 is equal to 1 and 6/6 are equal to 1. And if you notice, it's the same number on the top and the bottom, and that equals 1. Next, it says color fractions equal to 3/2 in green. So I'm going to look at 3/2 for my first number line. I see right here 3/2, and right below it is 6/4. So those are equivalent. And here's my 3/2 for my next number line. And right below it is 9/6. So those are equivalent. The next one says color fractions equal to 2 in red. So here's 2. 4/2 is equivalent to 2, and 8/4 are equivalent to 2. And here 4/2 and 12/6 are equivalent to 2 because they are right below each other and on top. All right, now it wants us to use the number line to finish these number sentences and write the missing number. So let's look at this. It says 2/4. So it's talking about the 6. So we have to look at the number line that has 6. So 2/4. So I'm going to look where 2/4 is. Oh, this is a little bit different. So it actually wants us to look at here and here, the bottom. So 2/4, we saw that 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2. So if we see 1/2 right here, because they equal the same thing, and I look below, 1/2 is equivalent to 3/6. Now it wants us to do 6/6. So I'm going to look at 6/6. So I see that 6/6 is equivalent to 2/2. And 2/2 is also equivalent to 4/4. So 6/6, 2/2, and 4/4 all equal the same thing. They all equal 1 because they both have the same numbers at the same at the top. All right, the next one says 3/2 is equivalent to, so I'm going to look for 3/2. So 3/2 is equivalent to 9/6. And it's also equivalent to 6/4. So 3/2 equals also 9/6 and 6/4. They equal the same thing because you can see that we circled them all in green. So if you look at 2/4 and 3/6, they're both circled in blue. If you see 6/6, 2/2, and 4/4 are all circled in yellow. And if you see 3/2, 9/6, and 6/4 are all circled in green. All right, let's move on. Oh, and that's all for week 8, day 2. So remember, we're just filling in blanks and then we're finding numbers that are equivalent to each other. All right, and make sure that you're going on Zearn and ST Math and you have your packets picked up. If you have any questions, you can contact me, Miss Fifield, or Miss Fisher with any questions. All right, and I'll see you next week. Bye.